Hi, my name is Rachel, and I still remember the night everything broke. My sister Emily leaned across the table, her eyes sharp, her voice loud enough to rattle the dishes. She pointed her finger straight at me and shouted, "You're nothing without us." Then she slammed her glass down so hard it cracked. Red wine spread across the tablecloth like a stain that would never wash out. And the hardest part? My parents just sat there, silent. No one told her to stop. No one defended me. They looked at me like maybe I deserved it, like I had brought this on myself. That was the moment I realized something was terribly wrong. But to understand how we got here, I need to take you back, because it didn't start with that glass of wine. It started years ago, with me trying to hold a family together that never seemed to want me, except when they needed something. I grew up in a small town in Michigan, a place where winters bite hard, where houses creak under the weight of snow, and where everybody knows everybody's business. My parents weren't wealthy. Dad worked at the auto plant until layoffs hit. Mom picked up part-time shifts at the grocery store, but it was never enough. Bills piled up fast, and stress hung over our house like a storm cloud that never passed. I was the oldest of 3. Emily was 2 years younger than me, and our brother Ben came along 5 years after that. From the time I was a teenager, responsibility fell squarely on my shoulders. I was the one babysitting Ben, the one making sure dinner didn't burn when Mom was too tired, the one calming Dad down when the notice from the bank came in the mail. Back then, I told myself this was normal. Families sacrifice for each other. That's what I believed. By the time I was 16, I was working evenings at a diner, sliding plates of meatloaf and mashed potatoes across the counter, saving every tip I could. Most kids my age were thinking about prom dresses or weekend games. I was counting out crumpled dollar bills, trying to figure out if it was enough to keep the lights on. When I got into college, I thought things would change. I thought I'd finally get a chance to live for myself. But the phone calls never stopped. "Rachel, can you help with the gas bill?" "Rachel, your dad's prescription isn't covered this month." "Rachel, Emily needs new tires for her car." And I said yes, every time. Fast forward a few years. I graduated, got a steady job in accounting, and finally moved into a small apartment in Detroit. For the first time in my life, I had a door I could lock that was mine. But instead of relief, what I felt was guilt. Because every time the phone buzzed, it was another reminder that my family was depending on me. At first, I didn't mind. I told myself, this is what good daughters do. I sent money for groceries, covered Dad's medical bills, even loaned Emily money when she promised she'd pay me back as soon as she got back on her feet. But weeks turned into months, months into years, and somehow she never got back on her feet. The payback never came. Instead, the requests got bigger, louder, more urgent. There was one night in particular I'll never forget. I was 28, sitting at my desk late, finishing reports for work. Emily called, sobbing into the phone. "They're going to tow my car tomorrow if I don't pay tonight." I wired the money without hesitation. The next weekend, she posted pictures online of a brand new designer handbag. When I asked about it, she laughed. "Don't be so uptight. You make good money. What's the big deal?" I didn't answer, but inside something twisted. Still, I kept going. When Dad's hours were cut again, I picked up the mortgage. When the roof started leaking, I paid for repairs. It became routine. I worked, they spent, and I convinced myself it was love. But love doesn't feel like a debt you can never pay off. Which brings me back to that night at the dinner table. It was a Sunday evening. The house smelled like pot roast, the way it always did when Mom wanted to pretend everything was normal. I drove out from the city because Mom said, "It's important. We need to talk." I walked in, offered my usual, "Hey everyone," and got nothing more than a glance. Emily was already laughing in the kitchen, her voice carrying like she wanted me to hear how happy she was without me. Mom gave me that tight smile, the one that looked polite but felt like judgment. Dad stayed in his chair, fiddling with his reading glasses like they might shield him from the tension. Dinner started quietly, but it didn't stay that way for long. Emily leaned back in her chair, eyes locked on me. "So big shot," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Too busy counting your money to help us last week?" I blinked. "What are you talking about?" "Nobody called me." She smirked. "There's always an excuse. You think you're better than us now, don't you?" The words hit harder than she probably realized, and that was when I looked around, at Emily, daring me to fight back, at Mom slicing pot roast like nothing had happened, at Dad polishing his glasses, avoiding my eyes. The silence was worse than the outburst, because silence meant agreement. And in that moment, I understood something I'd spent years avoiding. I wasn't part of this family as a daughter, as a sister, as someone they loved. I was a paycheck, a safety net, a resource to drain until there was nothing left. That realization sat in my chest like a stone, heavy, suffocating, unavoidable. And that's where my story really begins. I drove home that night with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The words echoed in my head like a chant I couldn't escape. "You're nothing without us." I replayed the scene over and over. Emily's glare, Mom's silence, Dad's glasses catching the light as he looked anywhere but at me. By the time I reached my apartment, my chest felt heavy, like I'd carried that dinner table with me all the way back to Detroit. I sat in the dark for a long time before I finally turned on the lamp. The quiet should have been comforting, but it wasn't. It felt empty. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe they were right. If maybe my whole life really had been defined by what I gave to them. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. Messages lit up the screen, missed calls, voicemails. I pressed play on one. Mom's voice came through, calm but sharp, the way she always sounded when she wanted something. "Rachel, we can't do this without you. The bank's been calling. If you don't help, we could lose the house. Is that what you want? For us to be out on the street?" Not a word about what had happened at dinner, not one apology. Just another request, another demand. I thought back to all the times before. I was 22, working the graveyard shift at a gas station to pay for college. Mom called me crying about overdue utilities. I skipped meals that week just to send her the money. I was 25 when Dad needed medication. Insurance wouldn't cover. I was barely making rent myself, but I picked up side work, sent the cash, and told him not to worry. I was 27 when Emily's car was about to be repossessed. She begged me for help. I wired the money and told her, "Please, get a handle on your finances." She laughed and said, "Relax. You've got a good job. I'll make it up to you," but she never did. None of them ever did. It wasn't just the money. It was the celebrations I missed, the dreams I delayed. The night I finally got promoted at work, I left early because Dad called in a panic about bills. My coworkers toasted to my success without me while I sat in my car, wiring money to keep the lights on at my parents' house. And through it all, I told myself the same story. This is what family does. This is what love looks like. But was it? Because when Emily humiliated me at the dinner table, when my parents sat in silence, that didn't feel like love. When the only messages I received were about money, that didn't feel like family. The more I thought about it, the more the memories piled up. Every dollar, every sacrifice, every time I pushed my own life aside. It was like stacking bricks on my chest. The next morning, I opened my laptop and scrolled through my bank transfers. Page after page of payments stared back at me. Thousands of dollars. Years of my life reduced to numbers on a screen. I whispered to myself, how did I become their safety net? And when did I forget to live my own life? I remembered the silver necklace Mom gave me when I was a teenager. A tiny key charm. She said, "This means you'll always have a place here." At the time, I wore it proudly. Now I touched the chain around my neck and wondered if it had always been a chain, not a promise. The phone buzzed again. This time it was Emily. Her text was short, sharp, and cold. "You need to step up." Family sticks together. Family. That word made my stomach twist, because in their version of family, I was never a daughter or a sister. I was an ATM with a heartbeat. I tried to shake it off, but the messages kept coming. Dad finally texted, "It's your responsibility. You're the one who makes real money real money." Like that was all I was. By the end of the week, I was exhausted. Not from work, not from life, but from them. I lay awake at night replaying every moment, every sacrifice, every time they'd called me selfish when I hesitated. And underneath the anger was something worse. Guilt. What if they really did lose the house? What if they ended up on the street because I finally said no? Could I live with myself? That question haunted me. One Saturday morning, I drove past their neighborhood without planning to. I slowed as I reached the cul-de-sac, staring at the house I'd practically paid for. The shutters still chipped, the porch swing still creaked in the wind. For years, I'd told myself this was home. But standing there in my car, engine idling, I realized it wasn't. It was a trap. I parked down the street, walked up to the mailbox, and stood there holding my phone. I wanted to call them, to scream, to demand answers, but I didn't. I just slipped my phone back into my pocket and walked away, because deep down, I already knew what their answers would be. Excuses, demands, silence. That night, I called an old friend, Lisa. She listened quietly as I poured everything out, the slap at the dinner table, the endless demands, the years of sacrifice. When I finally stopped, she said one sentence that stuck with me. "Rachel, love doesn't look like this. Real family doesn't treat you like a bank." I sat there in silence, holding the phone, tears running down my face, because for the first time, I realized she was right. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. The next day, I made myself a promise. No more excuses, no more blind support. If they wanted my help, I needed answers, proof, respect. It was the first step towards something I hadn't felt in years, control. And I had no idea just how much everything was about to change. The first clue came on a Tuesday morning. I was at work staring at spreadsheets when another message from Mom popped up. "The bank keeps calling. Please, Rachel, we can't lose this house. Call me back." I don't know why that message felt different, but it did. Maybe because she sounded scared, not demanding. Maybe because I was finally tired enough to notice the gaps in their story. Either way, something in me shifted. For years, I had wired money into their joint account, trusting them. I never asked for receipts, never questioned. I just believed them when they said it was for the mortgage. But that morning, I opened my banking app and scrolled through years of transfers, line after line, thousands upon thousands of dollars. My stomach tightened. I whispered to myself, "Where did it all go?" That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining the house collapsing, like all my money had been poured into a hole I couldn't see the bottom of. So the next morning, I called the bank directly. "Hi, this is Rachel Martin," I said, my voice shaking. "I need to verify mortgage payments for the property under my parents' names." There was a pause, the sound of keys clicking. Then the representative spoke gently, almost like she knew the words would sting. "Ma'am, I see here the account is 3 months delinquent." "No payment has been made since spring," I froze. "That can't be right. I've been sending money every single month. I'm sorry," she said. "But according to our records, those funds never reached us." I hung up the phone and just sat there staring at the wall. My hands shook. My face felt hot. My chest was pounding. 3 months behind. After years of me sending thousands, they hadn't even been paying the mortgage. I called Dad. He answered on the second ring, his voice flat. "Rachel, where's the money?" I asked. Silence. "I've sent you more than enough to cover the mortgage 10 times over, so where is it?" He sighed, long and heavy. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Harder? You've been lying to me. Tell me the truth." Another pause. Then finally in a low voice, "We've been helping Emily. She had debts, and there were things we needed to take care of." My stomach dropped. "So you've been using my money to clean up Emily's mess?" Before he could answer, Mom's voice cut in on speakerphone. "Don't you start acting like this is charity. We raised you. You wouldn't be where you are without us." I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was sharp, bitter, and cracked at the edges. "Unbelievable. I've been breaking my back for years, and you're telling me I should be grateful, that you stole from me and I should thank you." Mom snapped back, "Don't be ungrateful. After everything we've done for you, ungrateful?" That word sliced through me like glass, because that was the moment it became clear. They didn't see me as their daughter. They saw me as their lifeline. I ended the call before I said something I couldn't take back. The apartment was silent. I walked to my nightstand and pulled out the silver necklace with the tiny key charm. I pressed it into my palm until it left a mark. That key was supposed to mean I'd always belong, but now it felt like a lie. Whispering to the empty room, I said, "You don't own me anymore." And for the first time, I believed it. But belief wasn't enough. I needed action. I called Lisa, the friend who'd listened to me cry the week before. She didn't hesitate. "Rachel, you need to talk to someone who understands the law. You've been paying into that house for years. That gives you leverage. The word felt foreign on my tongue, but powerful. So we met at a coffee shop downtown. I spread bank statements across the table, rows of transfers highlighted in yellow. Lisa's cousin, a paralegal, joined us. He flipped through the papers, frowning deeper with every page. "Rachel," he said finally, "this isn't just generosity. With how much you've contributed, you may have an equitable interest. A lawyer could argue you have a financial stake in that property." My jaw dropped. "Wait, you're saying I might actually own part of the house?" "Not officially," he explained, "but with documentation, you could assert rights. They let you believe it was theirs, but your money built it." Don't underestimate that I sat back stunned. For years, I had thought of myself as the outsider, the one propping them up. But now, for the first time, I saw myself as more than just their provider. I had standing. I had power. That night, I wrote a message to my parents. 22 words. "I will no longer be making any payments toward the house until I have full documentation of where my contributions have gone." I stared at it for a long time before hitting send. My hands trembled, not from fear of losing them, but from the weight of finally admitting, out loud, in writing, that things had changed. The first hour, nothing. My phone sat silent on the counter. Then, at 10:14 a.m., Mom replied, "You've officially abandoned us. I don't have a daughter anymore." A few minutes later, Dad chimed in with one word: pathetic. I read the messages, my throat tight. There was a time those words would have shattered me. But now, I just felt grief. Grief and something else. Defiance. Because the truth was, I hadn't abandoned them. They'd abandoned me years ago. That evening, Emily called. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was like broken glass. "So this is it? You think you're better than us? You cut us off like we're nothing?" "I'm not doing this anymore," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Oh, you're doing it. You've been walking around like some savior, paying for everything, acting like we owe you. Don't forget who took you in when no one else wanted you." Her words landed like a punch, because what she was really saying was clear. Love was conditional. My place in the family had always been conditional. I hung up. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat at my kitchen table, the necklace in my hand, and whispered, "I don't need your key anymore." And that was when I knew. This wasn't just a family drama. It was a battle for my freedom. And I was done losing. The morning after Emily's call, I woke up with a dull ache in my chest. Sleep had been shallow, broken by flashes of voices, Mom's cold dismissal, Dad's silence, Emily's insults, but underneath the exhaustion, something else was stirring: determination. I brewed a pot of coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and spread out the pile of bank statements I'd printed. Each line was like a confession: rent covered, mortgage payments sent, utility bills paid. It was all there, black and white. Years of sacrifice, years of me carrying the weight. And for the first time, I didn't look at those numbers with guilt. I looked at them as evidence. That afternoon, I met Lisa and her cousin again, this time with a real estate attorney named Morgan. She was calm, professional, her voice steady in a way that steadied me too. "Rachel," she said, flipping through the stack of papers, "this is more than support. You've essentially been co-financing their lives. Based on what I see here, you have a strong case for equitable interest in that house. You may not hold the deed, but your financial contributions give you leverage." Leverage. There was that word again. Morgan leaned forward. "The first step is simple. Stop all payments, completely. Then request a full accounting directly from the bank. Once we have that, we can establish a clear trail of what you contributed and where it went. If necessary, we'll file to assert your rights." I swallowed hard. "And if they fight back?" She gave a small, knowing smile. "Then we let the facts speak. Families can lie. Numbers don't." I walked out of that office lighter than I had in years. For once, I wasn't just reacting. I had a plan. That night, I went to my bedroom, opened my nightstand drawer, and pulled out the silver necklace with the tiny key. I held it in my palm, the cool metal pressing into my skin. For years, it had been a symbol of belonging, a promise from Mom that I would always have a place. But standing there, looking at it under the dim light, I realized something. It had never been mine. It was their chain, their way of keeping me tethered. I whispered, "This key doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to me." And with that, I set it inside a small wooden box on my dresser, not as a chain, but as a reminder that I had chosen freedom. Of course, freedom didn't come without a price. The next morning, my phone buzzed relentlessly. Mom's voice on voicemail was colder than ever. "If you don't fix this by Friday, we'll lose everything. And don't expect to be welcome in this family ever again." Dad followed with a text. "Pathetic. We raised you better than this." Then Emily, as sharp as ever. "You'll regret this. You think you're strong, but you're weak without us." Each message was like a dart, but instead of piercing me, they bounced off. For once, I didn't rush to reply. I didn't scramble to explain. I just turned the phone face down and walked away. Because I finally understood something. Their anger wasn't proof that I was wrong. It was proof that they were losing control. The days that followed were strange. Quiet in some ways, loud in others. At work, I buried myself in projects, the rhythm of numbers soothing me. At home, I created a ritual. Every evening, I would light a candle, sit at my table, and review my progress. Documents sorted, calls logged, emails saved. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. But every time the phone buzzed, I had to fight the urge to answer. It wasn't easy. The guilt was still there, whispering. What if they're telling the truth? What if you're letting them down? When those thoughts crept in, I touched the wooden box with the silver key inside. I'd close my eyes and remind myself, love doesn't feel like a chain. Love doesn't demand silence. Love doesn't threaten to disown you when you stop paying. A week later, I walked into the bank with Morgan by my side. The clerk shuffled through papers, her hands moving quickly as she pulled the account file. When she looked up, her eyes softened. "Ms. Martin, according to our records, you've been listed as a co-signer on this mortgage. In fact, based on your payment history, you've been carrying the loan." I blinked. "Wait, you're saying I'm legally tied to the house?" She nodded. "Yes, And with your consistent contributions, you have the right to assume ownership if you choose. For a moment, I just sat there, stunned. Years of being treated like an outsider, like I didn't belong, like my place was conditional. And yet, here it was, in writing. I wasn't just a provider. I was the backbone, the legal foundation. As we walked out of the bank, the autumn air felt sharper, fresher, almost electric. I wasn't just free of their demands, I had power. That evening, I made the call. My voice was steady, deliberate. Meet me at the house. All of you. This ends today. Emily scoffed on the other end. Finally decided to crawl back? I almost laughed. You'll see. I hung up before she could respond. When I drove up the familiar cracked driveway that night, my chest tightened, but not from fear, from anticipation. The house looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. It wasn't home anymore. It was a battlefield. And for once, I wasn't the one walking in unarmed. They were all there. Emily, arms crossed, smirk plastered on her face. Mom, stiff in her recliner. Dad, pretending to be absorbed in the television. I didn't sit. I didn't even greet them. Instead, I walked to the coffee table and dropped a thick envelope with a deliberate thud. The sound echoed in the room. Those are bank statements, I said, my voice firm. Every payment I made, every dollar you misused, and this, I pulled out another set of documents, is my next move. Mom reached for the envelope, but I stopped her with a look. No, you'll hear it from me first. I took a deep breath, let the silence stretch, then said the words I had been waiting to say. I've assumed the loan. The house is mine now. You have 30 days to leave. The explosion was immediate. Mom shrieked. Dad slammed his fist into the chair. Emily's face went pale. You can't do this, Emily shouted. I leaned forward just enough for my words to cut through their chaos. You told me I didn't deserve a place in this family. Fine. But you don't deserve my money, my silence, or my home anymore. Their voices rose around me, angry, desperate, but I barely heard them, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't pleading. I wasn't explaining. I wasn't trying to earn love. I was standing in my power, and it felt like freedom. When I walked out of that house, their voices still echoing behind me, the night air hit me like a wave, sharp, cold, alive. I paused at the end of the driveway, my car keys in my hand, and looked back one last time. The house glowed in the dark, porch light buzzing like it always had. For years, I'd told myself it was home, but standing there, I realized it had only been a place I tried to earn love that was never really offered. I whispered to myself, not anymore. Then I got in my car and drove away. The first week was strange, quiet in ways I didn't expect. No constant buzzing phone, no panicked calls, no guilt dripping from every voicemail. Instead, there was silence. A silence that at first felt heavy, like an emptiness pressing down on me. But slowly, it began to feel different, calmer, softer. In my small apartment, I started new rituals. Every morning, I brewed coffee and opened the blinds to let sunlight pour in. Every evening, I cooked simple meals, nothing fancy, but meals just for me. Pasta with olive oil. Chicken soup. The kind of food you make when you're not rushing, when you're not answering the phone every 5 minutes. It was ordinary, but to me, it felt extraordinary. Of course, they didn't stop trying. Mom left more voicemails, her voice like poison wrapped in velvet. If you had any decency, you'd sign the house back over to us and disappear. You don't deserve to be part of this family. Dad sent short, sharp texts. Ungrateful. Pathetic. And Emily, she went further. Posts on Facebook, long twisted stories about how I had abandoned my aging parents, how money mattered more to me than blood. She even tagged cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Comments poured in. Shame on her. Some people forget who raised them. I read them once. Just once. Then I stopped. Because I realized none of those people had lived my life. None of them had worked my late-night shifts. None of them had drained their savings for someone else's mistakes. Their opinions weren't mine to carry. Work became my safe haven. My boss called me in one afternoon concerned after receiving an email from my mother accusing me of financial misconduct. For a moment, I panicked, but then I pulled out the folder of bank statements, the same ones I had slammed on the coffee table. "Here's the truth," I said steady, "and here's the proof." She nodded, flipping through the pages, then looked at me with quiet sympathy. "Rachel, I believe you. Don't let them destroy what you've built here." Walking out of her office, I felt something powerful. Validation. For years, I had been silenced, gaslit, told that my sacrifices didn't count. But now, the numbers spoke, and the numbers told the truth. Weeks passed. Slowly, the storm quieted. Mom and Dad moved into a small rental across town. Emily stopped calling, though her online rants continued. I thought I'd feel triumphant, like I'd won some great victory. But the truth? What I felt was relief that I no longer had to live at the mercy of their demands, relief that the endless cycle had finally broken. But relief isn't the same as joy, because there's no joy in realizing the people who raised you never truly saw you. There's only a heavy silence, the kind that forces you to sit with the truth. You can't fix what doesn't want to change. One Saturday, I found myself driving past the old neighborhood. I hadn't planned it. My hands just turned the wheel as if some part of me needed closure. The house stood empty now, curtains drawn, driveway bare. I parked at the curb, walked up slowly, and stood in front of the mailbox. I pulled the silver key necklace from my pocket. I'd kept it tucked away for weeks, unsure what to do with it. It felt cold in my hand, heavy. For years, it had been a symbol of belonging, a promise that I had a place, but now I saw it for what it really was, a chain, a weight. I slipped it inside the mailbox, closed the lid, and whispered, "This was never my home. I'm done trying to earn a place that doesn't exist." Then I walked back to my car and drove away without looking back. In the weeks that followed, something unexpected happened. Space opened up in my life where guilt used to live. I signed up for a weekend writing workshop, something I had always wanted to do but never had the time or money for. I started jogging in the mornings, breathing in the crisp air instead of rushing to answer calls. I bought a small lavender plant for my windowsill, a reminder that life can grow in new places. At first, these things felt small, almost insignificant, but each step was a piece of myself I hadn't known was missing. Lisa and I met often, usually over greasy fries and bottomless coffee at the diner near my apartment. One afternoon, I told her, "You know, I thought taking the house would feel like the biggest victory. I thought it would define me." She tilted her head, waiting. "But it doesn't," I admitted. "It's just a building." Freedom was the real prize. Letting go of them, of the constant need to prove myself, that's what set me free. Lisa smiled, that quiet smile of someone who already knew the truth. Now, months later, my mornings are still simple. Coffee, sunlight spilling across the lavender plant, a quiet apartment that belongs to me. Sometimes I still wake expecting my phone to buzz with their messages. Sometimes I still hear Emily's voice in my head, "You're nothing without us." But then I look around, at the home I've built, at the peace I've created, and I whisper back, "I'm not nothing. I'm me." And that's enough. Because the truth I've learned is this: family isn't about who shares your blood. It's about who respects your soul. And when blood becomes a chain, the bravest thing you can do is break free. Looking back, what hurt me most wasn't the shouting or the silence, but realizing I had given so much and received so little in return. Walking away from family was not easy. It felt like losing everything I once thought family meant. But the truth is, I gained something far greater: peace, dignity, and freedom. If you've ever carried a burden that wasn't yours to bear, remember this: you have the right to put it down. Sometimes the bravest step you can take is the one that finally sets you free. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. Remember, you deserve love, respect, and a place that's truly yours.